So, at just past midnight on August 18th, the sky over Moscow turned into a war zone, and by sunrise, the numbers coming out told a story the Kremlin never wanted the world to see. 620. That's how many Ukrainian drones Moscow's own mayor admitted were launched at the Russian capital in a single night. Not a probe, not a test. 620 aircraft, all at once, screaming toward one of the most heavily defended cities on the planet. Russian officials scrambled to claim victory, saying they'd shot down 180. But do the math, and that leaves 440 drones that got through, got close enough to force a reaction, or simply overwhelmed a system that was never built to stop this many at once. A Wildberries warehouse, Russia's biggest online retailer, took a direct hit. Alarms didn't stop ringing until morning. And the very next night, Moscow's air defenders barely had time to reload before the drones were back. This time over Tula, over Nizhny Novgorod, 300 kilometers inland, in cities that were supposed to be safe. This wasn't a fluke. This was the moment Russia's capital found out its sky isn't its own anymore. Picture it from the ground for a second. Millions of people in Moscow, woken up in the middle of the night by sirens that used to be rare and are now routine. Phones lighting up with air raid alerts. Families deciding, in the dark, whether to get up and move toward a shelter or just wait it out and hope. That's not a detail from a press release. That's simply what a 600-drone night does to an ordinary city, whether or not any single drone actually lands where it's aimed. The psychological toll of that kind of night, repeated often enough, is its own kind of weapon, and it doesn't show up in any official casualty count. Rewind to June, and you can already see the pattern taking shape. Ukrainian drones tore into the Moscow oil refinery, the single Gazprom neft facility that keeps nearly a third of the capital's gas stations running. 5 separate fires lit up the site at once. 17 people were hurt, 2 of them children, according to Russian authorities themselves. Aeroflot and its subsidiary Rossiya were forced to cancel more than 170 flights in and out of Moscow that day alone, with over 100 more delayed into chaos. President Zelensky's reaction was blunt. It was time, he said, for the war to end. It didn't end. Instead, it exploded outward. By July, the strikes had leapt thousands of kilometers east, slamming into one of Russia's largest oil refineries deep in Siberia, a target Moscow probably assumed was untouchable. Around the same stretch, an oil depot in Rostov Oblast, down in Russia's south, went up in flames after drones found it too. 3 major refinery-class targets. 3 completely different regions, inside of 2 brutal months. This isn't random. Somebody in Kyiv is working down a list, methodically, and Russia's refining network, deliberately spread out across the country so no single strike could cripple it, is being tested region by region, city by city, to find exactly where the cracks are. Now picture what a night like August 18th actually feels like from inside a Russian air defense battery, because this is the part nobody in Moscow wants dramatized, and yet it's exactly what happened. The first wave doesn't come from one direction, and it doesn't come politely. It comes staggered, in flights of 10, 15, 20 at a time, spaced just 20 or 30 minutes apart, precision-timed so that the instant one Pantsir crew finishes reloading, the radar screen lights up all over again. A gunner burns through belt after belt of 30mm rounds, tracking targets that are cheap, slow, and so numerous that shooting down 90% of them still leaves a swarm behind. Somewhere around the 3rd or 4th wave, deep in the night, the math simply stops working in the defenders' favor. Not because the crews get worse, because ammunition doesn't refill itself at 3 in the morning, and adrenaline only holds a line for so long before exhaustion does what the drones couldn't. And here's the part that should genuinely terrify the Kremlin. It was never really about how many drones got shot down. It was about how many times, in one single night, the sirens had to scream at all, and how many crews, how many batteries, how many radar operators had to treat every incoming blip as the one that finally slips through. Because behind every one of those alarms is a capital city grinding to a halt. Airports paused mid-operation. Flights held on runways or turned back mid-air. That one night in June alone cost Aeroflot more than 170 canceled flights, and August proved it was no fluke. Stack that kind of disruption night after night across an entire summer, and you're no longer looking at isolated incidents. You're looking at an air defense network forced to treat every single night as a potential 600-drone night, with zero warning of which night will actually be the big one, and zero room to relax without gambling everything on being wrong. There's a second front burning underneath all of this, and it has nothing to do with missiles. It's economic, and it's brutal. Russia has already been wrestling with a fuel crisis stretching back through 2025 and into this year. Shortages severe enough to shut down ordinary filling stations in region after region. That Moscow refinery alone supplied close to a third of the capital's fuel. Every time a facility like that goes up in flames, Russia doesn't just lose a day of output, it loses capacity, while bankrolling a war that's already stretching its budget to the breaking point, all while its own citizens feel the squeeze at the pump. Stack enough of these strikes, on enough refineries, across enough regions, on top of a fuel network already gasping before the drones even started arriving, and what you're witnessing isn't just an air campaign. It's a slow, deliberate bleed out of the entire war machine from the inside, one burning storage tank at a time, without a single Ukrainian soldier ever crossing a front line to do it. And all of this is happening while diplomacy goes absolutely nowhere. Talks between Moscow and Kyiv have been dead in the water for months, with neither side willing to blink first. Analysts covering this war have started calling these long-range strikes exactly what they look like: pressure, weaponized, delivered straight to Russia's doorstep, because the negotiating table refuses to move on its own. Ukraine doesn't need a dramatic breakthrough on the ground to make its point anymore. It just needs 620 drones, one clear night sky, and a target list that keeps getting longer. There's a reason Ukraine can even attempt a scale like this in the first place, and it isn't luck. Over the last 2 years, Kyiv has quietly built out a domestic drone manufacturing base that didn't really exist at this scale before the war. Factories converted, production lines multiplied, engineers pulled from every corner of the country to design cheap, mass-producible long-range airframes instead of relying purely on imported hardware. That shift matters enormously here, because a 600-drone night isn't something you improvise. It's something you can only pull off once you've solved the harder problem underneath it: building enough of these machines, fast enough, cheaply enough, to actually lose 400 of them in a single night, and still have more waiting in the next batch. Every wave that gets through Moscow's defenses is really the visible tip of an industrial effort that's been grinding away out of sight for months. And the West isn't sitting this one out either. Ukraine's long-range strike campaign has been running alongside a steady drumbeat of intelligence sharing, targeting support, and political cover from allies who have their own reasons to see Russia's war economy strained rather than growing. None of that shows up in the footage of a burning refinery, but it's part of why a campaign like this can keep expanding month over month instead of running out of steam after the first headline-grabbing strike. Compare that to where this war stood even a year earlier, when long-range strikes deep into Russian territory were the exception, not the rule, and a single successful hit on a refinery was treated as a major story on its own. Now it's June, then July, then August, target after target, region after region, and each new strike barely counts as a surprise anymore. It's simply the next data point in a pattern that keeps confirming itself. That escalation curve is exactly what should worry anyone still betting on this war grinding to a quiet stalemate, which leaves Moscow staring down a problem that has no clean solution. You can build more pantsir batteries. You can rush more interceptors into the capital. You can scatter refining capacity across more regions, so no single hit is fatal. But there is no version of any of that which guarantees a defense that has to be flawless every single night, against a threat that only has to slip through once to dominate the next morning's headlines. and that has already proven, at least 3 separate times in a single summer, that it can light a fire somewhere deep inside Russia's own borders. It's worth stepping back and asking why this particular tactic works so well against a country the size of Russia. Air defense is a numbers game, and it's always been a losing one for the side trying to defend everything at once. A modern interceptor missile can cost anywhere from tens of thousands to well over $100,000 depending on the system. A long-range attack drone, the kind flown in these waves, costs a tiny fraction of that to build. Every single engagement, even the successful ones where Russia's batteries do their job and knock a drone out of the sky, is still a trade where the defender spends dramatically more than the attacker. Run that trade 620 times in one night, and even a 70 or 80% intercept rate starts to look like a financial and logistical trap, not a victory. That's the quiet math running underneath every headline about how many drones got shot down. Shooting down the drone was never really the win condition. Making Russia bleed money and ammunition doing it, night after night, is. So here's where this actually stands, right now, tonight. 400+ drones broke through, or forced a reaction in a single wave over the Russian capital. A retailer's warehouse took a hit nobody in Moscow ever expected to be a target. A refinery fueling a third of the city burned back in June, and by July the strikes had already reached Siberia and the south. And they never slowed down after that. They just kept coming, wave after wave, into Tula, into Nizhny Novgorod, into Moscow itself, hammering a fuel network that was already buckling before any of this even began. And there's no reason to expect the target list to stay the same size it is right now. Every region that hosts a refinery, a fuel depot, a piece of infrastructure Moscow depends on to keep the war funded, is now a plausible entry on a list that's already grown from the capital to Siberia to the south in a single summer. Defending Moscow alone was already stretching Russian air defense past its comfort zone on nights like August 18th. Defending Moscow, plus Tula, plus Nizhny Novgorod, plus whatever region gets added next, all simultaneously, all treated as potential 600 drone nights, is a completely different scale of problem, one that no single build-out of new batteries solves quickly. Whether Moscow can actually close that gap, build the kind of layered, saturating defense it would need to make 600 drones a non-event, or whether August 18th was just the opening scene of a longer, darker autumn, spreading to more cities and more refineries as the weather turns colder, is a question nobody inside the Kremlin has an answer they're willing to say out loud. And every single clear night between now and whenever those stalled talks finally restart is one more chance for Kyiv to prove exactly how far this can go.